So I think she'll tell us. Yeah.
I am the Vice President for the League of Women Voters of Wyoming. And tonight's forum is sponsored by the League of Women Voters of Wyoming, the Teton County Library, the KHOL Library Radio, Jackson Hole News and Guide, Buckrail, and WyoFile. Our media panel tonight consists of Billy Arnold, who's magically invisible right here, and Lindsay Bell from Buckrail. We'll begin the night with candidates for House District 23, Liz Storr and Paul Vogelheim, answering questions first. The second part of our evening will start around 6:30 p.m. with candidates for Teton County Commission. All candidates will begin their session answering an icebreaker question. We'll rotate amongst media partners asking questions and the order of the candidates answering so that everyone has a chance to go first. Candidates get to use their red card twice at any time, and they're worth up to a minute and a half each. And those red cards can be used as the candidate sees fit. To rebut another candidate's answer, expand on their own answer, or bring up some topic that has been discussed. Sandy Shuptry, right up there. She is a League of Women Voters member, and she has cards. If you would like to submit a question to the media panel for consideration of asking the candidates, you can get a card from Sandy and write the question down, hand it back to her, she'll bring it back. Susan Dodd, another lead person, is our timekeeper. You each get a minute and a half to answer your questions. At the end of their portion of the evening, candidates will have 1 minute to sum up and give their closing remarks. So let's get started with the icebreaker questions.
Hello? Tell us about the most recent book you read.
Oh. And do we choose, do I get to go first or either way?
Yeah.
Okay. Well, great to be here this evening. Thanks to the League of Women Voters across the state for sponsoring such events like this, as well as our local partners here involved in the organization. And thanks to our young reporters, who I always appreciate that we have some great reporters and people interested in journalism here in Wyoming. I haven't read as many books as I would like of late, I will admit. The last book I did read was it was a bit of an assignment for my foundation for our board to read, which is How Civil Wars Begin. And it was less about the Civil War, which was really the War of Succession, than it is about what happens when people feel left out of a system that isn't working for them. And there's a lot of great lessons there. I think most of all, it was something that resonated with me, thinking about how Wyoming can transition and needs to transition, but we need to bring everybody along as we think about how we're transitioning from the fossil fuel economy that we have.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for the questions, and good evening. Thank you, League of Women Voters and the press, for being here. Thank you. My name is Paul Vogelheim, and the book that I've read recently, I was kind of late to get to it, but it was The Billionaire Wilderness, and it was a little bit of well, obviously a reflection on our neighborhood, on our community. I think it picked on the Yellowstone Club a lot more, which I appreciated, that it wasn't just picking on us, but our neighbors to the north. But it sure referenced the division, the growing division in our community between those that have $1 billion and those of us that are working, and how important it is to continue to somehow find our way, weave our way through, to continue to maintain our community, regardless of folks that are coming in from the outside.
Okay, I'm also going to kick it off with the first question. House 23 represents a large large geographical region. How would you describe your potential constituents? What issues do you think they face?
Paul, you can go ahead.
Yes, just to explain a little bit on the geographic makeup of our House District 23. It winds its way from the south, going north. You're down in Raptor J and everything kind of on the east side and the north side of South Park Loop on up, and then through crossing over the river to go out to Wilson, or not out to Wilson, excuse me. Sorry, Andrew, didn't mean to get you. It crosses then Moose Wilson Road up into the park, Buffalo Valley. There's some folks from Buffalo Valley here tonight, but it's a long, a large area, and we're still trying to sort through it sometimes. But with that diversity, we have ag areas, we have areas of high density, and we have obviously the resort community, all of which provides quite a diversity of folks that live here and economies that are dependent on some of the decisions that we'd be making down in Cheyenne.
Thanks, Paul. It is worth noting that House District 23 probably is, frankly, one of the wealthiest legislative districts in the country. I think we want to make sure that it also is a place for families. And it does include Raptor J, Melody, and some other parts of the county that are frankly our middle-class families, and a little bit of town as well, north of Broadway. So I think we need to think about it as not, we want to keep our families here, we want them to be part of our community. We probably want to make sure that we don't have too many more second home owners, and that it needs to be a place where obviously housing needs to be addressed, which is true across the county, as well as funding for education is super important across the state as well as throughout House District 23.
Great, I'm Billy Arnold. I'm the environmental reporter for News and Guide. Covered the legislature, and I used to cover the county commission for about 2 years. So stick around for that. But this question for you all is about abortion, and this question, just to preface it, is not are you pro-choice or are you pro-life? The question is, the Supreme Court's decision to overturn Roe v. Wade concluded that decisions about abortion acts should be decided at the state level. And hoping to get specifics here, my question is, what restrictions, if any, do you think should be imposed on abortion in Wyoming? And how would you, if at all, modify the state's current abortion ban, which is being litigated?
Since 1973, Wyoming women have had access to safe and legal abortion. And that is until a fetus survives outside a woman's body, which is between 23 and 26 weeks of pregnancy. That is still the law today, partly because we have a challenge to the trigger ban that the legislature passed last session that says when we look at our Constitution, we believe that either man or woman has the right to decide his or her own health care. I absolutely oppose any effort by the Wyoming legislature to abridge those rights. It should also be said, I think, that criminalizing abortion does not stop abortions. It just makes abortions less safe. Regardless of whether abortion is legal or not, they happen. I will certainly defend the right for women to make that choice for themselves rather than for politicians in charge. And I really do believe that access to safe and legal abortion is a human right and something that impacts your life so much that it really should be your decision. Thank you.
You know, this is one of the toughest issues that I think that we're going to be facing down in Cheyenne. And abortions, no one likes abortions. It has torn our communities apart, friendships apart. But my position on this is that I want to make sure it's clear that I support a woman's right to choose and to have access and privacy to reproductive health. And I will be fighting down in Cheyenne to make sure that we are looking for permanent protections for these rights and these freedoms. Not sure how that's all going to play out. We obviously have had a shift to states' rights. I think one of the first things that probably will be challenged down there will be the issues such as exceptions. And the exceptions for incest or rape or women's health are things that I'm going to be fighting for.
Go ahead.
Paul, I appreciate that no one really wants to have an abortion. But I still haven't heard from you whether you support a woman's right to choose to have an abortion. And I'd like you to answer that question for this audience.
Liz, I thought I was very clear that I was in the last 4 months that I've been running, that I support a woman's right to choose.
To choose to have an abortion?
Excuse me? Did you just allow me to finish?
I just want clarity.
It's a woman's right to choose, and that and women deserve a right to have access to their care, to reproductive care, and quite frankly, you know, some of the Facebook posting and some of the things that are taking place in this election are going to make, you know, are misstating or incorrect in terms of the position that I've made very clear, and it's been on my website, and that I would appreciate that when we sit here and we look at issues that we somewhat agree on, there's other issues that we don't agree on, and those issues would include the property taxes and some of the other statements that have been made. So I would appreciate the fact that, you know, that we make sure it's clear, and yes, I am supportive of a woman's right to choose.
Do you think did they answer the question you
I
asked?
was just going to ask, are reporters allowed to follow up?
Yes.
I think for both candidates, my question was, what restrictions, if any, do you support on abortion? The current bill currently bans abortion with exceptions for rape and incest and the like of other, not including emotional health. And I guess my question to put a point on it is, has that bill gone too far? How would you amend it, if at all, to bring it in line with your position on abortion?
Are you referring to the trigger ban?
Yes.
The trigger ban is in effect at this point in time.
Yes.
Right, so I would not vote for the trigger ban provisions. Does that answer the question? I believe in what the rights are currently, and I would like them to stay that way.
So speaking specifically to the trigger ban is what we're talking about, and what exceptions we would look for, or changes or amendments to the trigger ban. Does that?
I think the trigger ban is a starting point, but there are other proposals like nationwide, coming from Lindsey Graham, a 15-week ban on abortion, or ban on abortion after 15 weeks. And, you know, when it comes down to being in the legislature, you will have to decide on the specifics of the policy. And I'm wondering, when specifically do you think abortion should be allowed? question.
So I think that the trigger ban does reference specifically the viability of a child, and I think the timeline for that is a little bit in dispute, but 20 weeks is what I understand is a norm. But some of those type of things we're going to be down. We'll be down in these are decisions that aren't made by us. These are decisions that are made by the legislature, and to influence those directions. And one of the three things, as I mentioned earlier, that I will be fighting for would be the maintaining of the rape or incest, women's right to choose. Women's health, if that's in question. Those are the types of things that I'll be fighting for to maintain those exceptions.
Sure.
So I want to talk about the real estate transfer tax. What are your opinions on the many times failed county optional real estate transfer tax? The most recent version of the bill that failed 19 to 40 would allow counties to consider a 1% tax for any value in the sale above $1.5 million. Andy Schwartz is currently representing the seat, but not running for re-election. And he has championed this bill. Will you pick up where Andy Schwartz left off if you support it? And if you do pick up where you left off, what would you change? And then I guess explain if you do not support it and if you're offering any other alternatives.
Polly, you guys answer first.
Great. Andy Schwartz has been a champion for this bill for a lot of years, and it hasn't moved forward. I currently cannot support it as it's presented, in part because of it really not being defined on the back end. We've had a situation here in this county where we had a housing authority that took care of housing, operated pretty independently. There was land banking involved. There was putting up an office on Broadway, no government oversight. They were in the construction business. I'm worried about that type of scenario coming through. It's just not throwing money at a problem, but defining clearly how, at the back end, as money would be generated, how that money would be utilized, and how it would deliver solutions to affordable housing. So until that is answered, I would not be in support of it today, or this first year. I would consider it with some of those questions that I've raised being answered.
I do support a real estate transfer tax, and here's why. The only projects that we see getting built here in Teton County that are actually not digging the whole housing hole deeper are ones that are supported by private philanthropy and public dollars. Obviously, private philanthropy, even in Jackson Hole, is limited. And obviously, public dollars are too. But a real estate transfer tax does seem to be a way that is both equitable and reasonable approach to creating more public dollars to help support better affordable housing options. I think we could create an exemption in it that makes sense for this community. I don't know what that number is. I would welcome thoughts on that, but is it $500,000 or $1 million that we want to exempt from that, so we're not hurting middle-income families when they're selling their house? But at the end of the day, I think the way to pass this is for this community to come together, and I would welcome both real estate and real estate development folks to sit down and talk through what ideas they have for solving this problem, because it's not getting solved all by itself. If we came together and we came to an agreement and we talk about whether it's this or something else, we could actually make something happen in Cheyenne. But until that happens, we won't.
Go ahead, you want to use your
Sure. As we look at this problem, and I think there's been some great strides that have been made. We learned a lot of lessons at the Grove project, which is close by, right behind me here. And we realized that having government in the construction business and the development business does not always work when we saw cost overruns on that project. So as we looked at phase 3 and we moved on from phase 2 that did not work, we looked at reorganizing the housing authority and coming up with a joint department of town and county oversight. And April Norton and her team have done an amazing job in terms of moving forward with a number of projects that you're seeing all around town. I would also like to compliment the Community Foundation of Jackson Hole. They've taken a role in facilitating and convening and pulling together on the Jackson Street apartments, 57 new units that are coming through that town and county are partners in. But it serves as an example of folks in the philanthropists that want to step forward and help be the solution for these type of projects. And again, I think having those type of partnerships, public-private partnerships, are the solution. And my favorite of all of those folks is the just what happened in phase 3 of the Grove and how well that was done.
Just to keep going on the taxation front, I'll start with a question from the audience. You guys should just raise your hand. Who here is a homeowner? Cool. And then hands down. Who in here saw the property taxes go up by over 20% last year? Great. So to both of the candidates, for House District 23, what should we do about property taxes? Do you support a cap? If not, why? And if you do, why? And what would you like to see done generally?
Liz, you get to go first.
Thanks, Dee. And thanks for this question. This has obviously been something that's really important to this whole community, and it's a challenge to figure out how can we actually create some greater flexibility for homeowners when suddenly you've got a 40% increase in your property tax, and you're a middle income family. So I do think we need to think about that's the problem we're trying to solve, and recognize that creating some kind of flexibility for the payment of those property taxes makes sense, and understand that while the value of our homes do go up and we will benefit from that on the long down the road, we also, this is where we live, and we need to be able to pay our bills. So I do think certainly some kind of program that actually does help low and middle income families makes absolute sense, and also just creates some flexibility. Frankly, the state could create it could create some kind of program that allows for low interest loans that are better than what we can get in the market. They certainly loan to lots of people. But I also don't think a across the board cap makes sense, especially when it applies to second homeowners who will just be incentivized further to buy property here. That just doesn't make sense at all. It's got to be focused on who it's really going to benefit.
This is a crisis. As I've gone door to door and 650 houses I've knocked on, the number of folks that have talked about being one tax increase away from having to leave their community that they've been born and raised in, or they've lived and raised their families in. This is a crisis. And when I go to check in every week at Browse and Buy, and when they're talking about 2 to 3 families a week that are dropping by the stuff that won't fit on the moving truck, this is a big deal. So this is where I've spent most of my time in looking at the legislature and attending the revenue committee meetings online. And there were 16 different ideas that were proposed. By far the one that would have the greatest impact immediately here in this community would be cap the tax. And a cap the tax I'm proposing would be 5%. There's other percentage rates that are being discussed. But in talking to the legislators, there is a bill that is being drafted, and the fact that this could be implemented immediately, if it has to have to go through a judicial review, but to have that immediate response as opposed to waiting for a constitutional amendment that'll take 2 to 3 years, we don't have that time. This is a crisis, and so we can fix this, but the one that I feel is the most sound is the cap on the property tax. There are a couple of other ideas that will generate $300 to $400 off your tax. That's not going to meet the needs of the citizens of this community.
I'd like to ask you a follow-up to Paul's answer. Wondering if you would like to see that cap tax for single homeowners or second homeowners, especially since Teton County is full second homeowners, would it go across the board?
Lindsay, you're asking a great question, and it's a tough one. I see the immediacy of having us come up with something that's most critical because of what's happening to citizens being forced out right now. What you're proposing, there's some other ideas that are being Representative Yen is proposing a breakout of residential, for instance, and in a way having it set aside not only as residential but also owner occupied. But with that bill, it's going to take 2 or 3 years before it can be actually a constitutional amendment that would work. So, yeah, the second homeowners are going to get a little bit of a pass on this, but I think it's so critical. We can buy some time to. We have $30 billion down in the various funds down in Cheyenne. We do need to reform our tax laws, and there's some things that we can improve upon. But I see this as an emergency situation, and that the best thing we can do right now is put a bill forward, cap the tax, implement it next year, and prevent the bleeding off of some of our heroes in our community.
I think we have time for one more question.
Any questions from the audience too?
They've been asked to bring
Oh.
gift cards to Sandy, and Sandy's been.
Okay.
We've not received any of these questions yet.
You have?
But if we do, I would entertain it, for sure. But the last question that we'll ask is, currently there's some Republicans in the legislature that are currently advocating restricting the Secretary of State of the sole authority to oversee elections because Chuck Bragg's questioned integrity of Wyoming elections in the 2020 presidential election won the primary. Would you support that effort? And the effort I'm talking about specifically is to change the structure of the Secretary of State's office and election oversight and spread it across the state's top 5 elected officials? And the second part of that question, do you think it's appropriate for the legislature to be doing to consider that?
Oh, great. I was disappointed in the election on a couple of different fronts, and yet the voters have weighed in. Chuck Ray has been elected. He's going to be the Secretary of State, and I think that I look around and I look at the way the government is set up, and in particular the county clerks, as to the ability that the county clerks are going to be able to keep him in check a little bit. I'm looking over at Sherry Daigle, and she's smiling, and it's a force to reckon with when you deal with the clerks. So I think that I have faith in the system. I think customizing and trying to kind kind of strip him of his powers is inappropriate. And I just, I trust in our system. It's very decentralized. I trust in the credibility of our election process in the state of Wyoming. And I would not be in favor of stripping him of his powers.
I kind of want to take a wait and see approach. I also recognize that the Secretary of State has powers that are given to that position. There are also, though, a number of powers that the state gives to the 5 elected officials. And in some ways, Wyoming's system is set up to be kind of shared among those elected officials. So it wouldn't be the first time were that to take place to decide that the 5 elected officials would share in some kind of oversight, some kind of checks and balances, especially if we think that the Secretary of State is not allowing for free and fair elections. I, like candidate Nethercott, believe that our election system is free and fair and safe and secure, and I think our county clerks do a great job. And I do not believe there are any questions about election fraud. I would be concerned, though, if we saw interference happening at our local election level coming from the Secretary of State, and then we might need to act.
All right, well, thank you very much for attending this forum. We're going to take about a 5-minute break and let the county commission candidate.
Closing.
Oh my gosh, I'm getting way ahead of myself. You still want to talk? We get a minute.
Go
You have to
for
go
it.
ladies
Go
first?
for it.
Well, I'm going to stand up because I can always talk better when I stand up. So tonight, we had a chance. Thank you all for coming out. Thanks for the opportunity to kind of deal with some issues. Some of these are obviously very, very difficult and very personal issues that are hard to work through. But I've been in this community for 25 years. You've seen me embedded in service. I've had an attitude of service as I've worked through starting up the Jackson Cupboard, to working as a scout leader for 20 years, to being on either as a board member or a leader of 12 different nonprofits. And most importantly, that I've been a stepfather for 2. May I use my card for the second one? Thank you. Bonus round. So I've been a stepfather for 2 beautiful stepdaughters. And as I look at going to Cheyenne, if given the opportunity, I'm ready to lead. I've had a chance to be a county commissioner for 10.5 years. They say that that's the best proving ground to be a legislator down in Cheyenne. And as we look at the difference in parties, I'm a moderate. I've worked with really well with, I see Hank Vibbs out there and other folks that I've had the honor of working with. But at the state legislature, it's a Republican-run government. It's a majority. And so in November, there'll be a gathering of the Republicans to have a caucus to talk about what issues we're going to be facing this year. And it would be my honor to be down there representing you to talk about the issues we have in this community. And the biggest one that I'm going to be pushing on will be the cap the tax, the 5% maximum increase. Please check out Vote for Vogelheim. I sure would appreciate your vote. Thank you very much.
I think I'll stand too, because I'm vertically challenged anyway. Thank you, Paul. I just want to say that the reason I'm running is because I have this deep love of this state that I've spent most of my adult life in. I'm actually the only candidate running for House District 23 that has lived outside of Teton County. I've lived in Cheyenne, a little town called Saratoga, even a smaller place called Ryan Park. And I've been involved in policy work in the state for 30 years and still work in my day job to influence that. So as a result, I have relationships across the state and lots of them in the legislature, and I feel like I'm in a great position. I'll also use my red card a little bit. The state has a lot of challenges. We've got tax issues, education, funding. Obviously, we need to wean ourselves off of fossil fuels. And I do feel like there's a lot of magical thinking going on in Cheyenne, especially, I think, from the far right. And it's worth understanding that there really are two Republican parties operating down there. One is the party of the far right that is really taking the Wyoming GOP into the ground, frankly. And then there are a lot of moderate and also very conservative legislators who are trying to solve Wyoming's problems. Those are the people I've known for the last 30 years. Those are the people that I can work with. Those are the people that I can bring Teton County values down and some, real world solutions that I think can help actually move the state forward. And I appreciate the opportunity to do so. Thank you very much. Liz Storr.